Look at your hand right now. Maybe there's a ring on it. Maybe you're wearing a bracelet, a necklace, earrings. It probably feels like decoration. Something extra. Something humans invented once we had enough food, enough money, and enough free time. But what if that's completely backward? What if jewelry existed before farming, before cities, before writing, maybe even before humans had fully become human? This story starts with a handful of seashells. Around 100,000 years ago, on the slopes of Mount Carmel in what is now Israel, people were living in a cave called Skul. In the late 1990s, archaeologists excavating the site made a strange discovery. They found dozens of small sea snail shells. At first, this doesn't sound unusual. Shells wash up everywhere. But there was a problem. These shells shouldn't have been there. The cave was miles from the coast. Someone had carried them there. Then researchers noticed something even stranger. Each shell had a hole punched through almost exactly the same spot. Some still contained traces of red pigment called ochre. Someone didn't simply collect these shells. Someone deliberately pierced them, colored them, and probably strung them together. In other words, someone made jewelry. The shells were dated to somewhere between 100,000 and 135,000 years old. That is unbelievably ancient. No farms, no kingdoms, no pyramids, no metal tools, no written language. And yet someone was already wearing accessories. But school isn't alone. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, archaeologists discovered another collection of perforated seashells. These were about 75,000 years old. Different continent, different people, different time. And somehow they reached exactly the same idea. Find something rare, put a hole in it, wear it, which raises a question: why? Why would people who were still hunting animals with stone-tipped spears spend time making necklaces? You can't eat jewelry. It doesn't keep you warm. It doesn't help you outrun a lion. So why did it matter? Most archaeologists think these objects weren't decoration in the way we think of decoration today. They were information. Imagine meeting a stranger 100,000 years ago. You don't know their language. You don't know whether they're friendly. You don't know whether they belong to a powerful group or a tiny struggling family. But then you notice something. They're wearing shells from the ocean, and you're nowhere near the sea. That tells you something important. These people travel, or they trade, or they know other groups. They have connections, and connections meant survival. A necklace could instantly communicate information without saying a single word. It could tell you where someone came from, who they belonged to, maybe even whether they were important. In a way, jewelry may have been one of humanity's first forms of communication. And here's the strange part. Your brain still responds to it. Evolutionary psychologists often point to something called costly signaling theory. The idea is simple. A signal only works if it's difficult to fake. Anyone can claim to be important, but not everyone can walk around wearing something rare. A shell carried for miles meant effort. A necklace made from uncommon materials meant access. Access meant resources. Resources meant status. And your brain notices status. It always has. In fact, that's still happening today. A plastic watch and an expensive watch both tell the same time, but they don't feel the same. A plain ring and a diamond ring both fit on your finger, but they don't communicate the same thing. The materials changed. Your ancient brain didn't. As thousands of years passed, jewelry didn't disappear. It exploded. Around 4,500 years ago, in the ancient city of Ur in Mesopotamia, archaeologists discovered the tomb of a woman known as Queen Puabi. She was buried with incredible amounts of jewelry: gold ornaments, decorated headdresses, beads made from carnelian and lapis lazuli. And one detail is astonishing. Lapis lazuli doesn't naturally occur anywhere near Mesopotamia. The nearest source is in modern-day Afghanistan, over 1,000 miles away. For those stones to reach Queen Puabi, enormous trade networks already had to exist. People crossed deserts and mountains just to move beautiful rocks from one side of the world to another. Objects with almost no practical use. Except one. They meant something. Ancient Egypt took this idea even further. The Egyptians believed gold was the flesh of the gods. Unlike iron, it didn't rust. Unlike wood, it didn't rot. It seemed eternal. And Egyptians desperately wanted eternity. They buried jewelry with the dead, placed amulets onto mummies, filled tombs with ornaments. Jewelry wasn't just for living people. It was equipment for the afterlife. And something remarkable happened. Across thousands of years and across continents separated by enormous distances, human societies kept arriving at exactly the same conclusion. Find something rare, put it on your body, let it speak for you. But this story has a darker ending, because the same instinct that created shell necklaces eventually became powerful enough to reshape entire civilizations. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the Americas during the 1500s, they encountered societies with deep relationships with gold. The Inca considered gold sacred. They called it the sweat of the sun. It wasn't simply money, it was spiritual. The Spanish saw things differently. They saw wealth. Mines were opened. Entire systems of forced labor emerged. One mountain in modern Bolivia, called Cerro Rico, became one of the largest sources of silver the world had ever seen. Over centuries, enormous numbers of laborers died there from exhaustion, mine collapses, and mercury poisoning. The mountain became known by another name, the mountain that eats men. Think about how strange that is. The instinct that began with someone carrying shells back to a cave eventually became one of the forces helping drive empires, conquest, and exploitation. None of this means jewelry is bad. In fact, it means the opposite. Jewelry reveals something profound about us. Humans are creatures of meaning. We take ordinary objects and turn them into symbols. A shell becomes identity. A bead becomes status. A ring becomes love. A crown becomes power. The object itself is almost never the point. The meaning is. So the next time you put on a necklace or glance at a ring on your finger, remember something. You're participating in a behavior so ancient it existed before farming, before cities, before writing. More than 100,000 years ago, someone picked up a shell, punched a hole through it, and decided it mattered. And in some ways, every piece of jewelry you've ever seen is still telling the same story.